The Avon, a quite shallow little river that winds its way through the city of Christchurch to the sea. Come and explore with us as we take a look back in time. In 1850, Edward Jolly surveyed and mapped 1,000 acres to become the new town of Christchurch. That's about the area inside the 4 avenues today. This land was high and dry, and not a swamp as urban myth suggests. For a time, Jolly lived in one of the huts at the Bricks. This is the oldest settlement on the Canterbury Plains. There is a monument there today at the Cambridge Terrace, Barbados Street Junction. Then the river was much deeper and the banks far steeper than today. They named the place the Bricks because this was as far upstream boats could get easily, and the Deans brothers had unloaded a pile of chimney bricks here. The resulting wharf became a focal point of early Christchurch. This early success of getting goods up the Avon to the Bricks wharf soon led to the extensive use of the river for navigation. Tow paths on both banks were reserved from the estuary to Fendleton Bridge. The wharf was fully established by 1851, and early settlers landed their possessions here as well as various kinds of cargo. Regular traders from Sumner to the wharf included some boats up to 15 tonnes. However, a little known fact is that between the years 1860 and 1900, there were a number of attempts at running paddle steamers on the river. The first of these was the Avon. She was fabricated in England and assembled here. Even though the steamer only had a draft of 15 inches, she ran aground often. Water then had to be pumped out of her boilers to float her off. This proved very dangerous as the boilers could then explode. She only made a couple of runs to Sumner. She ended her days converted as a gunship on the Waikato. The last of the paddle steamers on the river was the Avonia. She was built here in Christchurch and launched in 1890. She had a hinge funnel to enable her to pass under bridges. However, she was sabotaged twice and sunk at her moorings. She was around for 10 years and ended her days with knives fitted to the paddles and used as a weed cutter. With the advent of other transports such as rail and trams, as well as the continual problem of silt and shallowness, the Bricks Wharf then fell into disuse. In 1926, a memorial was erected to mark the site. The woman holding the banner was one of the original settlers who arrived on the Charlotte Jane. There were many farms along the river in the 1850s. As the city and the province grew, better buildings were needed. In 1859, work began on the Canterbury Provincial Government building. These early photos, some by Dr. Barker, show its construction. The bridge in the foreground here was one of the first over the river and known as the Land Bridge, later to become the Victoria Street Bridge. These are some early scenes along Oxford Terrace, including Dr. Barker's house. This is in fact the first Victoria-era bridge in New Zealand. Built in 1864 over the Avon for better access to Market Square, now Victoria Square, the bridge still carried traffic into the city until the area was extensively remodelled in 1988. Of course, boating and rowing were always popular on the river, and there is a long history with the first rowing clubs established in the 1860s. Boat sheds were developed on the stretch of river by the Fitzgerald Avenue Bridge. The season's opening day regattas in mid-October became an important social event, and thousands gathered to watch the races and the floral boat displays. These pictures are from around 1900. However, the river became so shallow that the clubs had to move to Kerrs Reach in the 1950s. Nothing now remains of the old club buildings. There were many smaller pleasure boats on the river, and boating was a very popular pastime in the late 1880s, as it is today. There must have been quite a demand for boats to hire, as there are about half a dozen commercial boat sheds along the Avon within inside the city. Only the Antigua boat sheds survive today. They were built in 1882 and were said to be the most complete in the colony. There were also substantial boat sheds at Montreal Street, which predate the Antigua Street sheds, but these burned down in 1929. There have been several monuments built on the banks of the Avon commemorating those who fell in World War I. The first erected was the Bandsman's Rotunda in Hagley Park in 1926, the Bridge of Remembrance, and of course the Edmonds Band Rotunda, which was donated to the city by Thomas Edmund. It was still used for concerts until it was converted to a restaurant in the late 1980s. Chain rail fences were erected along the banks of the river because between 1850 and 1900, 105 people died by drowning in the River Avon. To quote the press of 1861, "If there is one spot in the city which has caused more offence than any other in New Zealand, it is the Avon riverbanks, down which innocent children and tipsy men alike have fallen. The long flaxes trembled at the shrieks of the drowning, and the silent stream rolled gloomily over the bodies of the slain."